A racist officer stops a young black woman from boarding her flight, accusing her of suspicious behavior, even though she urgently needs to get to her sick mother. The officer is taken aback when the woman, with support from the surrounding passengers, stands up for herself and turns the situation around. Emma hurriedly stepped through the crowded security gates at the airport, anxiety consuming her. Just hours ago, she had received a call from her sister, who told her that their mother's condition had worsened, and she was now in critical condition at the hospital. "You have to come right away. She doesn't have much time left." Her sister's voice broke, barely holding back tears. From that moment, everything became a blur for Emma. Each step, every movement felt as if it was pulled along by a current of worry, with just one thought in mind: getting home before it was too late. Emma checked the plane ticket in her hand while glancing at her phone, the screen still displaying a photo of her mother on the hospital bed, wires and tubes surrounding her. Tears had been streaming down her face since the news came, but she reminded herself to stay strong, to stay calm, so she could get home as quickly as possible. "I'll make it," she reassured herself, but each time she looked at the clock, the worry surged, pushing her to hurry even more. When Emma arrived at the security checkpoint, she saw Officer Mills, a stern-looking female officer, standing at the front, her gaze sharp and cold. Mills looked her over from head to toe, as if scrutinizing every small detail. A chill ran down Emma's spine when she caught that scrutinizing look, but she tried to remain calm, telling herself that this was just routine security. "It's okay. I just need to get through this and get on my flight," she murmured to herself. Emma stepped forward and handed her ticket over with a faint smile, but Mills didn't smile back. Instead, her eyes surveyed Emma's bag and the tension on her face. Mills narrowed her eyes, her lips tightening, as if she had just noticed something suspicious. She demanded a thorough inspection of Emma's belongings, leaving Emma feeling like she was being treated with suspicion, even though she'd done nothing wrong. Emma's worry began to shift into unease. Why was Mills looking at her like that? Why was she being asked for such a thorough check? But Emma didn't dare to resist, fearing that any action might cost her precious time. Emma closed her eyes, took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, hoping to get through this quickly so she could be by her mother's side. But just as she opened her eyes, Officer Mills stepped closer with an even colder look and asked her to open all of her bags for further inspection. Every item in Emma's bag, from her handkerchief and notebook to a small water bottle, was taken out and inspected carefully, as if Mills was looking for something illegal. Emma bit her lip, fighting the feeling of humiliation as each personal item was put on display in front of everyone. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Mills asked, her tone flat but carrying an edge of cold suspicion. Emma tried to respond calmly, but her voice wavered. "My mother is very ill. I need to get home immediately." She hoped her answer would help Mills understand her urgent situation, but Mills's expression didn't change. Her eyebrows raised just slightly, and she pursed her lips, as if she'd heard this story too many times before. "Everyone has their own story to tell," Mills said, with a dry, cold tone. A wave of anger began to rise within Emma, but she held back. She didn't want to do anything that might cost her more time. She'd heard stories of passengers being delayed or banned from flights for overreacting in security areas, and in this situation, the last thing she needed was any trouble. "Please, I just want to get home to my mother," Emma pleaded, her voice almost begging, hoping Mills would let her go. But Mills remained unmoved, if not more suspicious. "Are you sure you have nothing to declare? You seem quite anxious," Mills said, her piercing eyes staring straight into Emma's, as if trying to find any sign of deception. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. Why was her anxiety being seen as something suspicious? She was only trying to get home. Why was she being treated this way? These thoughts left her feeling a heavy sense of injustice, but she kept her composure, reminding herself that it would soon be over. Yet Mills showed no signs of stopping. She motioned for Emma to step aside. "We need to conduct a more thorough inspection, just to ensure the safety of the flight," Mills said coldly. Emma looked around, feeling the curious eyes of other passengers on her. The shame and helplessness felt like a dark cloud surrounding her, but all she could do was stand still, not daring to react, praying that Mills would soon let her through. However, judging from Mills' expression, Emma realized this might drag on longer than she thought. Mills not only held onto her luggage, but also ordered Emma to raise her arms for a full-body inspection. Emma felt the gaze of everyone around her, as if she were a criminal. Her heart pounded in her chest, and a strong feeling of anxiety and anger began to rise within her. However, at that moment, the fear of being detained held her back, so she closed her eyes, trying to reassure herself that it would soon be over. As Mills performed the check, she continued to ask questions, each one laced with suspicion. "When was the last time you flew?" Mills asked, her tone even. "Are you traveling alone? Did you buy this ticket yourself?" Emma tried to respond politely, but she couldn't hide the trembling in her voice. She didn't understand why Mills was asking these questions when she was just a regular passenger, doing nothing wrong. "I'm traveling alone, and yes, I bought the ticket myself," Emma replied, trying to keep her voice calm but unable to mask her unease. Mills kept looking at her with that suspicious gaze, her eyes sharp as if they could cut through any defenses Emma put up. "You seem nervous. Is there anything you haven't told us?" Mills asked, her tone both mocking and probing. Emma almost lost her patience, her eyes filled with anger and helplessness. "I already told you. I just want to be with my mother. She's in the hospital," Emma said. This time her tone was not as gentle as before. She couldn't believe Mills's heartlessness and coldness, especially after she had clearly explained her situation. But Mills still showed no sympathy. Instead, she sneered, as if doubting Emma's sincerity. "Everyone has their own reasons," Mills said, emphasizing each word, her piercing gaze making Emma feel as if she were on trial. "We just need to ensure there's no threat to the flight." Emma bit her lip, fighting back tears of humiliation and helplessness. In her mind, the image of her mother lying in that hospital bed came back, reminding her that she couldn't waste any more time. But Mills was in control here, and any attempt to protest would only make her appear more suspicious in the eyes of this cold-hearted woman. Suddenly, Emma heard a quiet voice from a man standing nearby. "She hasn't done anything wrong. Let her go." It was a middle-aged passenger named Mark, who had witnessed the entire ordeal and felt outrage. He looked at Mills with a disapproving gaze, filled with empathy for Emma. But Mills only glanced at Mark, replying icily, "Please do not interfere with our work." Emma felt a slight sense of relief at the support of this stranger, but Mills's firmness quickly extinguished the faint glimmer of hope. She looked back at Mills, her eyes pleading, "Please, I just want to be with my mother. I haven't done anything wrong." However, Mills seemed to have made up her mind. She stood tall, arms crossed, her tone shifting from suspicion to an imposing authority. "This is a security area, and I have the right to detain you if I deem it necessary," Mills declared, her voice firm and cold. Emma stood frozen, the feeling of despair and powerlessness weighing on her like a boulder. She looked around, hoping for a little support from those around her, but everyone remained silent, avoiding her gaze. Yet in just a moment, Mark, the middle-aged passenger who had spoken up before, couldn't hold back any longer. He stepped closer to Mills, his voice filled with indignation. "Ma'am, she's just a young woman trying to get home to her mother. Don't you see that you're overreacting?" Mark said, his gaze firm as he looked Mills straight in the eye. He didn't raise his voice, but the determination in his words drew the attention of other passengers, and a growing sense of disapproval began to fill the eyes directed at Mills. Mills, still maintaining her cold demeanor, turned to look at Mark with a warning glare. "Please do not interfere with my work," she replied, her tone mocking and resolute, as if all the support for Emma only strengthened her desire to assert her authority. "This is a security area where we ensure absolute safety. Everyone may have a reason, but that doesn't mean we overlook inspections." Emma looked at Mark, her gaze filled with gratitude and helplessness. His support was like a small light in the darkness, but she knew Mills had the upper hand here. Resistance only made Mills more determined, and Emma felt as though she was being pushed deeper into this unfair situation. Another passenger, an elderly woman standing nearby, also spoke up. "This young lady clearly hasn't done anything wrong. I've been watching from the start, and it's clear she just wants to get home," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "We're witnessing a blatant abuse of power." Mills still didn't back down. She looked around, her face expressionless, determined to maintain her authority. "If anyone else feels dissatisfied, please keep it to yourselves. "This is my responsibility," she replied, her tone rigid as steel. Emma felt the pressure from all sides, from Mills' suspicious gaze to the tension in the air around her. But in that brief moment, a strong sense of resolve rose within her. She couldn't allow this injustice to continue without doing anything. Emma looked Mills straight in the eyes, trying to stay calm, but her voice no longer wavered as she said, "I've done nothing wrong. I just want to be with my mother." The simple, sincere words touched the hearts of those around her. The tension grew as several other passengers began voicing their support for Emma. Some even took out their phones to record the incident as the anger and disapproval started to swell. Mills, though still maintaining a firm stance, seemed a bit rattled by the resistance and social pressure mounting around her. Backed into a corner, Emma stood there, feeling as if she'd reached her breaking point. Mills looked at her with that cold, authoritative gaze, unrelentingly conveying that she was the one in control here. With a firm voice, Mills said, "You will not be allowed to board this flight." Her words struck Emma like a sentence, slamming shut all the fragile doors of hope she'd been holding on to. Emma stood there, her heart pounding, feeling both fear and anger rising within her. Sensing the escalating tension, a few passengers began murmuring, looking at Mills with disapproval. Mark, the middle-aged man who had stood up for Emma from the beginning, stepped forward again, his eyes blazing with anger. "Ma'am, this girl just wants to board her flight home to see her critically ill mother. Don't you think you're going too far?" Mark's resolute voice rang out, followed by nods of agreement from nearby passengers. Mills turned to look at Mark with a glare full of intimidation. "Please do not interfere with my work," she replied, her tone cold as ice, her gaze sharp as a blade. Clearly, she had no intention of backing down or changing her decision. She looked around as if to emphasize that she was in charge here, and that anyone who protested would have to face the consequences. Emma could see the unreasonable rigidity in Mills's gaze, and felt a wave of anger and helplessness wash over her. She clenched her hands tightly, trying to keep calm, but the sense of humiliation and oppression grew stronger with each word from Mills. "I already said my mother is very sick," Emma said, her voice choking up. "Please, I just want to get home in time to see her." Mills looked down, her lips curving into a mocking smile, then coldly said, "Everyone has an excuse, but my responsibility is to keep the flight safe. You can make a scene, but that doesn't change the fact that I have the authority to hold you back." Some of the surrounding passengers began showing open anger at Mills's unreasonable stance. An elderly woman standing next to Emma spoke up, her voice shaking but full of resolve. "Let her go. We all see she's done nothing wrong. Treating someone who just wants to be with her family like this is wrong." The woman placed a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder, as if to shield her from the injustice she was enduring. Her words prompted a few others to voice their agreement. "She hasn't done anything wrong," someone else said loudly. The crowd's voices grew louder in protest, making Mills appear slightly uneasy, though she tried to maintain a firm stance. A young man held up his phone, beginning to record the incident. "Everything you're doing is being recorded. If necessary, we'll send this to management and the media for accountability." Forced into an uncomfortable position, Mills glanced around at the crowd with an angry and defiant look. She clenched her fists, trying to assert her authority in the face of growing disapproval from the gathering onlookers. "I ask everyone to remain silent and not interfere with my work," she shouted, but her voice no longer carried the same authority as before. "This is a security area, and I have the right to handle disruptive behavior." Emma could feel the strength of the support around her. She realized she wasn't alone, that there were people willing to stand up for what was right. With newfound courage, Emma took a deep breath and spoke, her voice now stronger and more resolute than ever. "I am not causing a disturbance, nor have I done anything wrong. I am simply asking to be treated fairly and with the same respect as any other passenger." Mills looked at Emma, her eyes flashing with anger. She stepped closer to Emma, lowering her voice to a menacing tone. "Are you trying to make this difficult for me? I already asked you to leave. If you continue to cause trouble, I'll call more security to remove you from this area." Emma didn't back down. Her eyes were determined as she looked directly at Mills, her voice strong and unwavering. "I am not causing trouble. I am simply asking for my right to be with my mother. You are abusing your power and being unfair." Her words were met with enthusiastic support from the crowd. A young woman standing nearby shouted, "We all saw she did nothing wrong. Don't abuse your authority like this." The crowd began to lose patience, with many holding up their phones to capture the scene, and some began shouting for Mills to stop. The rising support from the passengers grew louder, leaving Mills visibly unsettled as the voices around her demanded justice for Emma. Seeing herself losing control, Mills lowered her hand from her radio, though she still tried to maintain a hint of authority. She looked around at the crowd, her voice weaker but attempting to stay firm. "Fine, but don't blame me if there are any consequences." Her final words sounded more like a threat, but it was clear they no longer held the same power as before. As Mills stepped back, the atmosphere lightened. Several passengers sighed in relief, and a few even came forward to give Emma reassuring pats on the shoulder. Mark, the middle-aged man who had spoken up from the beginning, smiled, looking at Emma with admiration and empathy. "You were very brave, young lady. Go on, and I hope you make it home to your mother in time," he said, his voice warm and sincere. Emma felt a wave of relief, as if she'd just escaped a nightmare. She smiled at those around her, her eyes full of gratitude for each person who had supported her during such a difficult time. She bowed her head slightly, feeling emotional as she said, "Thank you, everyone. I don't know what I would have done without your help." In that moment, Emma realized that her courage wasn't just for herself, but also for others who might face similar injustices in the future. The crowd's support not only allowed her to continue her journey home, but also proved the strength of solidarity and kindness. The tension in the air felt like it was ready to explode, and Emma stood there, feeling as if she'd reached the very limit of her patience. When Mills raised her radio, preparing to call for more security, Emma knew that if she didn't act now, she might lose her last chance to be with her mother. Drawing on every ounce of courage left, Emma stepped forward, her voice full of resolve and defiance. "I have nothing to hide. I am not causing a disturbance. I just want to go home. You have no right to stop me when I've done nothing wrong." Her clear, powerful words hung in the air, causing everyone around her to fall silent for a moment, even Mills appearing briefly surprised, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her cold gaze. Mills quickly tried to reassert her authority. She stepped closer to Emma, almost touching her, her voice low but full of threat. "I have the right to do whatever is necessary to maintain order," Mills emphasized, her eyes flashing with anger and determination. But before Mills could issue further commands, Emma, instinctively protective and determined not to be subdued, pulled back, jerking her hand away from Mills with a firm motion. Emma's unexpected resistance made Mills freeze momentarily, her eyes widening with surprise and anger. "You dare?" Mills started, and in her rage she reached out to grab Emma again, as if to assert her control. However, Mills's actions only fueled the outrage of the passengers around them. Immediately, Mark, the middle-aged man who had supported Emma from the beginning, stepped forward, positioning himself between Mills and Emma, like a protective barrier. "Enough!" he said loudly, his voice firm and unyielding. "She hasn't done anything wrong. We can all see that. You're abusing your power." Mark's strong words were like a wake-up call, sparking a wave of indignation through the crowd. An elderly woman nearby, her eyes red with empathy, stepped closer to Emma and called out, "This young woman just needs to get home to her family. Stop forcing her." Those words ignited a flame in the already tense atmosphere, and one by one, people in the crowd began to voice their support for Emma. Some passengers raised their phones, recording the entire scene, their cameras like watchful eyes documenting every moment. A young man held his phone high, glaring at Mills defiantly. "Everything you're doing is being recorded. We'll send this to airport management and the media if necessary." Mills looked around, her expression shifting from anger to confusion, as she realized she was now the focus of public criticism. She turned to Emma, then glanced at those around her, trying to mask her embarrassment. "Everyone, please remain calm," she said, her voice weaker now, attempting to maintain authority. "This is a necessary security procedure. This woman needs to be thoroughly checked." "What procedure?" Mark retorted, his voice sharp. "She's just an ordinary passenger, and we can all see that you're overstepping. What kind of protocol allows you to question and pressure someone just for wanting to go home?" Mills stared at Mark, trying to keep her composure, but it was clear she was losing control. She even began to take a step back, as the crowd, growing increasingly agitated, showed signs of losing patience. Another woman standing next to Emma put a hand on her shoulder and said, "You don't have to endure this. We're here for you." Those warm words, the solidarity from the strangers around her, sent a wave of emotion through Emma. She no longer felt alone in this ordeal. Gratitude and determination coursed through her. She looked Mills straight in the eye, her voice now resolute, not pleading, but firm with the conviction of someone standing up for what's right. "I just want to get home to my mother. You have no right to stop me when I've done nothing wrong," Emma said, her eyes blazing with determination. The crowd around her erupted in support, their objections growing louder and echoing through the security area. "Let her go!" someone shouted. Others chimed in, their voices blending into a powerful collective demand that Mills could no longer ignore. Cornered by the crowd's pressure, Mills finally had to relent. She looked around, her face betraying a mix of embarrassment and anger. Lowering her radio, she was clearly no longer in control of the situation. Still trying to retain a semblance of authority, she muttered, "Fine, but don't blame me if there are any consequences." Her words fell flat, and Emma stood silently, feeling relieved as she was finally released from that suffocating control. Passengers around her patted her on the shoulder, some offering comforting words, others showing admiration. Emma turned to the people who had stood up for her, her eyes filled with deep gratitude. In that moment, Emma realized that it was the unity and courage of those around her that had helped her through this difficult situation. She no longer felt alone. Emma smiled softly, grateful to everyone who had defended her in that trying moment, understanding that sometimes justice and kindness can arise in the most unexpected places, even among strangers in a busy airport. Just then, an airport manager in a crisp uniform approached, his face anxious as he surveyed the commotion and the crowd gathered around the security checkpoint. "What's going on here?" the manager asked, trying to keep his voice calm but clearly worried. A few passengers immediately pointed at Mills, their eyes still full of indignation. An elderly woman who had stood by Emma from the start stepped forward and spoke loudly. "This young lady just wants to go home to her sick mother, but she's been detained unfairly for too long without any valid reason. We've all seen it." The manager looked at Emma, eyes thoughtful, then turned to Mills. "Mills, what's this all about?" he asked, his tone firm and authoritative, clearly displeased with the situation. Mills faltered for a moment but tried to maintain a stern voice, masking her embarrassment. She looked suspicious. "I was just following security protocols to ensure the safety of the flight," Mills said, casting a glance at Emma, then at the crowd with a cold, defensive look, as if to assert she was still in the right. The manager scanned the crowd, seeing the clear discontent on their faces. He sighed and turned back to Mills, his voice gentle but firm. "I understand the importance of safety, Mills, but we can't let a procedure drag on this long without proper cause. This not only upsets the passengers, but also affects our image." He then turned to Emma, his eyes softening with sincere concern. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience you've experienced," he said earnestly. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, trying to keep her emotions in check, but her eyes glistened with gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you. I just want to be with my mother. She's very ill, and this is my only chance to get to her." The manager nodded, a look of empathy and understanding crossing his face. Before he could respond, several passengers began speaking up, recounting what they had witnessed. A young woman raised her hand, her voice loud to ensure the manager heard her clearly. "We all saw Mills detain her for far too long without good reason. She just wanted to get home, and Mills's behavior was completely out of line." Another man, the young man who had been recording, stepped forward, holding up his phone. "I recorded the whole thing. I can provide the video if needed." The manager looked at the crowd, his expression becoming more serious. He understood the gravity of the situation and knew that mishandling it could escalate passengers' discontent further. He turned back to Mills, his eyes stern. "We have enough witnesses and evidence here to confirm that protocol was overstepped. Mills, I suggest you return to the office immediately and await an official review." Mills's eyes widened, a flash of anger and frustration crossing her face. She looked at the manager as if to protest, but catching the determined look in his eyes and the accusing stares from the crowd, she realized she had no choice. She bowed her head, reluctantly accepting the order. "Fine," she said, trying to keep her voice even but unable to hide her embarrassment. Before leaving, she cast one last glance at Emma, a mixture of resentment and defeat in her eyes. As Mills walked away, the atmosphere in the security area felt lighter. A few people in the crowd sighed in relief, while others turned to Emma with encouraging smiles. The manager turned back to Emma, his expression gentler. "I'm truly sorry for this incident, ma'am. We'll make sure you don't face any further obstacles. You can board your flight immediately." Emma sighed in relief, as if a huge burden had been lifted. The manager's words, along with the support from the crowd, gave her a sense of protection and respect. She looked around, her gaze meeting those who had supported her. Some passengers stepped up, gently patting her shoulder, smiling reassuringly, and wishing her a safe flight. Mark, the man who had defended her from the beginning, smiled warmly, his eyes full of kindness. "Go on, girl. I hope you make it to your mom in time," he said with compassion. Emma smiled, trying to keep her composure, but her voice was still choked with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you all. I don't know what I would have done without your help." In that moment, Emma felt her heart swell with gratitude and relief. The solidarity and kindness of those around her had helped her overcome a daunting challenge, giving her faith in justice and human kindness among strangers. She knew that while injustices might arise in life, there would always be people willing to stand up for what's right. The manager smiled and gestured for Emma to follow him, ensuring she would encounter no further trouble. As they walked toward the boarding gate, he turned to her, speaking sincerely. "Once again, I'm sorry for what happened. We'll make sure this incident is thoroughly investigated and addressed properly." Emma nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She looked back at the crowd one last time, a grateful smile on her face, before stepping through the gate. Her heart felt warm as she thought about those who had stood up for her, strangers who were willing to defend justice when they saw wrong. Emma stepped onto the plane, carrying with her a profound belief in humanity and justice. She sat down in her seat, her heart feeling lighter than ever. Outside the window, the vast blue sky stretched out, bringing hope and gratitude for what she had just experienced. She closed her eyes, silently thanking everyone who had helped her, with only one wish left in her heart: to be with her mother. Emma knew that this flight was not just about reaching a destination, but a journey to rediscover her faith and resilience. No matter what challenges life might bring, she would always remember that she was never truly alone when standing up for what was right. When the plane landed and Emma looked out the window, she felt more at peace than ever, as if she had left behind a storm to step into calm. Soon after, she reunited with her mother in the hospital. Seeing her mother's pale face light up with joy at her return, Emma realized that all the hardships of the trip seemed insignificant. A few days later, while sitting beside her mother in the hospital room, Emma received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, a woman's voice introduced herself as Linda, a representative from the airline's customer relations department. "Hello, Emma. I'm calling on behalf of the airline and would like to extend our sincerest apologies for what happened during your trip," Linda said with a formal yet heartfelt tone. "We deeply regret the unpleasant experience you had to endure." Emma was silent for a moment, surprised by the call. She wasn't sure how to respond. Linda continued, her voice slow but assured. "We have received reports from the airport manager and from passengers who witnessed the incident. Management has decided to conduct a formal investigation into Officer Mills's actions. Our airline wants to assure you that this matter will not be overlooked." Emma felt as if a great weight had been lifted. The feelings of helplessness and frustration she experienced during her journey now felt acknowledged and validated. Linda went on. "The management has collected extensive evidence from other passengers, including video footage and testimonies. We are taking this very seriously and have begun addressing the issue. We want to ensure that all passengers are treated with respect and protected when using our services." Hearing these words, Emma felt a sense of calm and peace wash over her. Linda did not stop there. She continued, "On behalf of the airline, we would like to send you an official written apology, along with compensation for the emotional distress you experienced. We hope this can help ease the unfortunate incident and show our sincere regret." Emma paused for a moment, reflecting on her journey. She knew that she didn't need compensation to feel fulfilled, but the official apology and decisive action from the airline made her feel respected and protected. "Thank you, Linda," Emma replied, her voice soft but clear. "What I want is for no one to have to endure what I went through, and the seriousness with which the airline is handling. This shows me that my voice has been heard." Linda responded sincerely, "It's the least we can do. Thank you for bravely standing up for what's right. Your feedback motivates us to improve our services and ensure that all passengers are treated fairly." She paused for a moment and added, "Emma, if there's anything else we can do to assist you, please don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for you." The call ended, and Emma sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on everything that had just happened. Looking out the hospital room window, she saw the warm sunlight streaming in, bringing a sense of peace. The injustice she had endured now felt resolved, replaced by trust in justice and human decency. Although Mills had caused her distress and anger, Linda and the airline had proven that there were still people who listened and understood. A few days later, Emma received a letter from the airline. Inside was an official apology and a commitment to improving the training process for security personnel to ensure fairness and respect for all passengers. The letter also emphasized that the airline would review its oversight procedures to prevent any potential abuse of power in the future. Holding the letter in her hands, Emma felt a deep sense of satisfaction. For the first time throughout her journey, she felt her efforts and resilience had paid off, not just for her own justice, but for the future of other passengers who might not have to go through what she did. Looking at her mother lying on the hospital bed, Emma felt a sense of relief and peace. Her struggle had not only helped her regain trust in justice, but also showed her that no matter the challenges, there were always people willing to stand by her and protect her. She knew that the valuable lessons she learned on this journey would be her companion in facing any challenges life might bring. Emma smiled, feeling the warm rays of sunlight on her skin, warming her not just with their light, but with the kindness and justice they symbolized. She knew that there would be moments of challenge and injustice in life, but now she was no longer afraid. She had learned that while we cannot always avoid the unexpected, we can choose to face it with resilience and trust in justice. In the months that followed, when Emma thought back to her journey, she always felt proud that she had dared to stand up for herself and for what was right. More importantly, she knew that those who had helped her would always be a testament to the power of kindness, unity, and courage. They were strangers, but they were not afraid to speak out and stand by her against injustice. Thanks to them, she not only overcame the challenge, but also found faith in fairness and kindness in life. Emma's mother's health gradually improved, and Emma stayed by her side, taking care of her each day and sharing family stories. Each time they talked, Emma cherished the value of family and every moment they shared. Sometimes, memories of the difficult journey would resurface. But instead of fear or anxiety, Emma now felt relief and pride for having overcome it. One afternoon, as she sat by the window watching the sunlight fill her mother's room, Emma received a message from the airline. They invited her to attend an important meeting to review and improve the training process for security staff and wanted to hear her feedback. At first, Emma was surprised, but then she realized that this was not just an opportunity to share her story, but a chance to contribute to positive change so that no one else would go through what she did. A few days later, Emma walked into the airline's headquarters with calm and confidence. She was warmly welcomed by Linda, the representative who had reached out and apologized earlier. Linda shook Emma's hand firmly, looking at her with genuine eyes. "We're very grateful you made time to come today," Linda said. "Your story has helped us reflect and change how we serve our passengers." Emma stepped into the large conference room, where several executives and key management members were present. She realized that what she was about to say would not just help close a chapter of her life, but could also bring meaningful change. In that room, Emma calmly recounted her entire story, from the fear she felt when Mills stopped her to the deep gratitude she felt when strangers supported her. She spoke about the insecurity of facing Mills' scrutinizing gaze, the feeling of being wronged and helpless while being detained, even though she had done nothing wrong. But then, Emma also shared the warmth she felt when strangers stood up for her, facing authority to defend someone they didn't know. Sometimes, the courage of a few individuals can create a powerful wave of change, Emma said, her voice resonating with confidence. And the most important thing is that every passenger, no matter who they are, deserves to be treated with fairness and kindness. The members of the room listened attentively, some taking notes, others looking at Emma with understanding and admiration. Linda, seated at the head of the table, nodded in agreement as Emma concluded. The airline's CEO, an older man with determined eyes, spoke up. Thank you, Emma. Your story is not just a lesson in how to treat others, but a reminder of our responsibility to ensure that every passenger feels safe and respected. We are committed to improving our training and oversight so that abuses of power are not tolerated within our organization. Following the meeting, the airline formally announced plans to reform its training procedures for security personnel and service attitudes. They pledged to conduct training courses on handling situations, respectful interaction, and protecting passenger rights. Emma could see the determination in their words, which made her feel that her efforts had brought about a meaningful change. On her way home, Emma felt a refreshing breeze on her face, as if all her worries and anxiety had been swept away. She knew that this journey was not just about her, but about the kindness and courage of the community around her. She promised herself that if anyone ever faced injustice as she did, they would have a community behind them, and that unity and bravery would bring unimaginable strength. When she returned, Emma sat by her mother, smiling as she recounted the meeting, the changes the airline had pledged, and the warm and respectful welcome she received. Her mother squeezed her hand, tears of emotion in her eyes. "You did it, Emma," she said, her voice trembling. "You stood up not just for yourself, but for others." Her mother's words were the final affirmation, confirming that this journey had not only helped Emma overcome a challenge, but had also brought value to the community. Emma felt filled with pride and gratitude, proud of standing up and grateful for those who defended justice and fairness. In the following days, when Emma reflected on her journey, she knew it had become an important part of her life. Each time she recounted the story, she not only spoke of the challenges, but reminded people that somewhere, strangers were also willing to stand by us, supporting us when we need it most. Emma's story gradually spread, becoming Anne, inspiration to those around her, reminding them that no matter who we are, we have the right to speak out when faced with injustice. Emma knew that she had made a mark, not just for herself, but for the community. She had become part of positive change, and that made her proud. Now she could look to the future with confidence and trust in the power of a single voice, in the kindness of those around her. From then on, Emma never stopped sharing her story, as a reminder that no matter how difficult life may be, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. And with each step forward, she knew she had left a mark, a change not just for herself, but for others too, those who were also searching for fairness, courage, and justice on their own journeys. In the end, after all the tension, injustice, and fear, Emma made it back to her mother, thanks to the strength of unity and courage from complete strangers. Through this experience, she realized that no matter where or when we face difficulties or injustices, there are always people willing to stand up for what's right and stand by our side. Emma's story wasn't just about a personal battle, but a testament to compassion, courage, and the power of community when everyone speaks up. Sometimes, even the smallest moments in life can leave the biggest lessons. Emma's story reminds us all that, in any situation, perseverance and kindness are always the guiding light that helps us through the darkness. Like Emma, be brave enough to stand up when you or others are wronged, because we are never alone in this journey. If you found this story meaningful and inspiring, please subscribe to the channel to not miss more stories of kindness, humanity, and profound lessons. Let's spread kindness together and create a strong community where we share and protect what's right.